We have Brady Robinson, Stephen Wan, Masoud Rana, and Jonas Aversbach from the University of British Columbia. And they will introduce us to the CCI, or the Center for Cardiovascular Innovation, their current projects, and as they implemented a randomization tool in DFDiscover, and some lessons from cybersecurity and protecting access to DFDiscover data. So Brady, I think that you are having the control of the presentation. So thank you for joining us, and all yours.
Great, yes, thanks, Rebecca. Hello, everyone, good morning, good afternoon, depending on your time zone. Yes, as Rebecca mentioned, we are the Center for Cardiovascular Innovation here at the University of British Columbia. I'm just gonna get my screen share started here. Okay, you can all see this? Great. Okay, so yes, just a quick intro slide here of our team. And our topic here is jumpstarting a research center with DFnet. So, you know, we have decades of experience in the cardiovascular research space here at the University of British Columbia. But just over the last 2 years, we've sort of consolidated everything down into this brand new research center called Center for Cardiovascular Innovation. As you might imagine, doing this in 2020, just as the pandemic was getting into full swing, proved challenging. And so we did look for a variety of tools to facilitate both starting up our center and starting up our clinical trials, and DFnet and DFDiscover have played a big role in that. So we'll just take you through exactly how we facilitated that. But first, just a quick overview of exactly who we are here at CCI. So as I mentioned, we're based out of the University of British Columbia, and you can see these are the affiliated existing centers that we work with in some form or another. We currently have 66 affiliated investigators and 39 full-time research staff. We have collaborations with all of these centers and are currently running 17 clinical trials. We are affiliated with 16 programs here within the Division of Cardiology, and we provide a variety, at CCI, we provide a variety of research services, as you can see in the central pillar of this diagram: data management, statistics, IT support, finance, pretty much everything from the very beginning, study design, all the way through to study closeout, database lock, and support with publication. And of course, DFDiscover is a big part of the data management piece. We sort of have these 5 pillars of our program here, providing education, research, organization, some of the partnerships you saw on our previous slide, as well as data services, which is the core of this presentation today. We've seen all of our smiling faces here already. I just wanted to stress 39 staff, 66 affiliated investigators. These are some of the clinical trials we have on the go currently. As you can see, we have sort of our central core studies here, as well as some a little bit more on the periphery. Today, what I'm going to be focusing on is the Complete TAVR study here, which is our sort of like our flagship project at the moment. It's N of 4,000 patients across 103 North American sites in the US and Canada. So as you might imagine, this is in the era of COVID, truly decentralized study with these 100-some odd sites all feeding their data to us through DFDiscover. So exactly how are we implementing that in this study? So first, let me just give you a brief background of Complete TAVR itself. So it's quite a mouthful here, the full title of the study. Essentially, what we're looking at here is the TAVR procedure, which is a minimally invasive catheter-based procedure that replaces failing aortic valves in the heart. And this is a well-established procedure now, still fairly cutting edge. Over the last 20 years or so, we've really seen it come into widespread clinical use. And what we're looking at here is patients who have been incidentally discovered to also have coronary artery disease, that is like blockages in their heart arteries. So how do we best treat these patients who both need their aortic valve replaced, but also have coronary artery disease? That's sort of the main question in the study. We're randomizing patients between 2 treatment strategies, And I'll let Jonas and Masood speak to the details of the randomization scheme in just a moment. Just wanted to stress that we do have these 100+ sites across the US and Canada, as you can see here. So quite a distributed geographically, also different standards of practice across these various regions. So it's proved to be both challenging and exciting, bringing these on in the era of COVID. I think when we were first thinking about the study back in 2019, we thought somebody like me might be doing a lot of traveling here to all these different sites. And I can confidently say I have never been to most of these places on this map. And so we're just doing everything remotely and virtually for the time being. I just wanted to quickly give you an overview of exactly what a TAVR procedure looks like here. So I've got a quick YouTube video. I'll just go through here with you very quickly. So you can see here's the heart. We're going to be zooming in on the aortic valve. Here you can see it's quite blocked and not really, the 3 leaflets there are not fully opening. This would probably be an elderly patient in their mid-70s or 80s. Just sort of over time that valve starts to deteriorate. So the cardiologist will gain access through the femoral artery in the leg and sort of snake this guide wire up through the aorta, around and through the heart valve, you can see here, which they then use this guide wire to introduce a balloon, which they snake up. Some very sophisticated plumbing here. And the balloon is inserted into the valve and then expanded. This kind of pushes the non-functional leaflets to the side, helps to open things up in preparation for the valve, which you can see here is now introduced. All of this done through an access site in the femoral artery that's just a little bit larger than a quarter. So it's quite amazing when you think, 25 years ago, this would have been an open heart procedure where patients were taken out of commission for weeks. Most of our patients here that we do in Vancouver go home the very next day after they have a brand new heart valve put in. So here you can see they're just maneuvering around the aortic arch there. The valve was put in place. You're going to see another balloon here in a moment that's inflated to expand the valve. And that's really all there is to it. This valve is now well seated in place. They're going to withdraw all of their equipment here. And in a moment, we'll just get an overhead view of what that new heart valve looks like. And you'll see here the opening is much wider, knowing that this is the aorta. It's the largest vessel pumping oxygenated blood all around your body. So this is a really key valve here. And when this valve is not functioning properly, the body is not receiving all the oxygenated blood that it needs. Here's our study overview diagram. I'm not going to go through all the details of this with you. I just wanted to stress that we have our sort of qualifying patients here at the top who undergo this TAVR procedure, who are then randomized. Again, we're using DF Discover randomization module to facilitate this. We've got 4,000 patients, 2,000 will go in each arm of the study. And then we go on to the follow-up period here. And just wanted to sort of use this diagram to give an overview of exactly how DF Discover is playing a key role in a few main areas of the study. So we've got eligibility assessment for patients at the time of enrollment, the randomization, of course, which we'll speak to in a few more slides here. The patients are stratified as well through the randomization system, which I'll let my CCI colleagues describe in more detail. We're also, of course, collecting data throughout this median 3.5-year follow-up period. We have an imaging component with our 4 affiliated core labs who will also be entering data after they perform their analysis, their central analysis. They will also be entering data into the DF database, as well, of course, monitoring study outcomes of interest throughout the course of the study. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these with you, but just each quickly point by point here. Of course, we have an eligibility case report form. This one's fairly simple, a lot of yes or no check boxes. But, as we saw in some of the other presentations today, data monitoring, remote monitoring for inclusion, obviously a very key point from the very beginning of a patient's journey through the study. Also the randomization and stratification pieces here on our randomization page, which we'll be seeing in more detail shortly. You can see we ask some key questions here in section B to stratify our patients, particularly regarding their oral anticoagulation. You know, a lot of these elderly patients need to be taking blood thinners. There's a worry that not a worry, it's true, this does lead to increased bleeding in some of these patients. So needed to make sure that this risk is evenly distributed across both arms of the study. So we did integrate that stratification aspect into our deployment of the randomization tool. And of course, follow-up as fairly standard here in most clinical studies. We have 30-day, 6-month, and annual follow-ups with dedicated pages for each of these in the DF Discover database as well. And outcomes also collected during follow-up and various points throughout the study. These are both standard of care interventions, actually. So, you know, we don't have an investigational drug or investigational product here, but we do collect select events of interest here. And then, of course, chasing down all of our 100+ sites to upload their images, making those available to our core labs for review, and then having those core labs in turn enter their data into the database, all achieved this way as well. And I'll just finish my part here with an overall timeline of the study. So, you know, CCI was up and running mid-2020 with full steam ahead. We had our first patients put in at the end of December, and then all the way out, as you can see for the timeline here, out to 2026. Maybe someday I'll meet some of the other people I've been working with and travel to some of their sites, but until then, it's definitely mostly virtual and widely distributed. I'm going to pass it off to the next presenter here from CCI.
Thanks, Brady. You made it through these slides in record time.
Thanks, Jonas.
Yeah, I'm Jonas. I'm an IT consultant for CCI. I've been working in IT, specifically in healthcare, for over 22 years. I've got some IT specific slides a little bit later, but I'll present some slides on randomization first. Amnat's done a great job already in an earlier presentation talking about the inner workings of the DF Discover, so that will save me some time as well. Brady, you're controlling the slides, right? Can you go to the first one there? I'll talk about the requirements that we had specifically for the complete cover study that Brady was talking about, the different software that's out there that we looked into, and then how we eventually concluded that the best choice for us was to stay with the randomization performed internally within DF Discover. So first, about randomization, it's considered the gold standard for a non-biased clinical trial. It prevents bias, that's the randomization piece. But then there's also a second piece that we often don't think about, and that's to balance between different treatment arms and different stratifications. Those are the keys to then establish causality. Next slide. This is where we're talking about balancing. So if you think about, let's say we had a random number generator that just spit out a random treatment or control every time we run it. It's true that over maybe running it 1,000 times, you would get 50% of the time a treatment and the other 50% of the time a control outcome. But even with a large study such as 4,000 patients across 100 sites, we might only have a couple, let's say 20 patients that are in site one that happen to be male that are under 20 years old. And so in that case, with a number generator, we might not get 10 outcomes that are treatment and 10 outcomes that are control, which is what we really want for analysis later on. And so we need this mapping that's created ahead of time, a mapping file. Amnat was talking about it. That's created by the statistician that ensures that balance, while at the same time also ensuring that we have a randomness. and that mapping file is hidden to the end user. It's blinded, so only the system can see that. But yet we know the predetermined sequence ahead of time, so that we're assured a balance. So those were our requirements going in, that we needed the software to do. Let's go to the next slide, Brady. So we looked at different IoT systems, but those are systems that perform this randomization. We looked at Almac, we looked at MedPace, we looked at PPD, we looked at IT Clinical. They all were very expensive, and they all had one problem in common, and that's that we have to still worry about interchanging information between DF Discover and those systems. So both directions, DF Discover has to move the stratification criteria to the IoT system, then we generate the random number there, and then we have to get the outcome back to our system. It wasn't just as simple as treatment and control. It's a little bit more complicated in our case. So we didn't want user error. So we didn't want users to manually input anything on either system to avoid user error. And we also didn't necessarily want to deal with messaging issues between the two systems. Either, even if they have an API on both ends, and there is a way to get information back and forth, there's still opportunity for information to get missed or out of sync or whatever. So we talked to Eric and Tadas, and they did a great job coming up with a system that was meeting those requirements with that I talked about. And so yeah, it has been performing really well so far. I won't go into detail specifically because Alma did already a great job talking about how it works behind the scenes. So I think, Brady, we can skip to the summary slide, sure. So to summarize, randomization is a key factor in clinical trial design. In addition to randomization, we also need the balancing, interchanging information with external randomization systems has its own challenges, and DF Discover provides a simple and reliable built-in randomization tool. So we're very happy to use that software without having to worry about any external tools. With that, I'll pass it on to Masood. I've got some IT slides later if there's time. Masood, go for it.
Thank you, Jonas. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah. So my name is Masood Rana, and I am a biostatistician at the Center for Cardiovascular Innovation, University of British Columbia. Today, I will share our de-identification tool that we developed here. So next, please. Medical imaging is one of the fastest growing segment in the healthcare industry. And DICOM has an extensive uses for medical imaging in hospitals. Here, DICOM stands for like digital imaging and communications in medicine. It is being used in the process of treating and diagnosis of patients, tracking patient outcomes, scheduling procedures, ICD-10 coding, billing, and teleradiology to transmit radiological patient images, for example, X-rays, CTs, MRIs. That means this DICOM has ever-increasing uses or need in the healthcare industry. Next, please. Sorry. Here is an example of a DICOM file. So the first part contains an image. Several patient-level informations are embedded in the image. It can contain sensitive patient identity, clinical information, or treatment option. A DICOM has a second component called metadata. It contains detailed information of all aspects related with the diagnosis and treatment. And all these informations are necessary to ensure optimum healthcare services. However, the patient level information contained in a DICOM file causes a significant problem in clinical research. HIPAA, or Health Information Protection Act, requires us to remove all identifiable information from a DICOM file before its uses in the research. So to overcome this barrier, we developed an automated tool that will remove any sensitive information from a DICOM file. Next, please. Here is an architecture diagram of our tool. So the tool can read any new DICOM file from a selected folder. And we have a structured naming conventions for our DICOM files. Sometimes these DICOM files contains unnecessary documents, for example, prescription, radiation dose information, or anything else. So the tool will check for any inconsistencies in the DICOM files and sort them accordingly. Again, our study will collect angiograms, echocardiograms, CTs, and hemodynamics. And we have designated core labs for different DICOM files. That means we need a process to sort those DICOM files. The tool will do that. Finally, the tool will remove any sensitive information and save them into a designated folder. Next, please. Here is an example of a processed DICOM. So first of all, there is no patient level information if you look at the image or in the metadata. Both have been removed from both places. Second, all clinical information left untouched. We might need to use these DICOM files in future for further research. That means we have to have some tracking system to relate those DICOM files with the appropriate patients. That's why the tool generated or automated ID and assigned to each DICOM files. So that's all from our de-identification tool, and I will pass the speaker to Jonas.
Hey, thanks, Masood. Yeah, Jonas again. I'll talk a bit about IT security here, more IT specific slides here. I've only got a couple of minutes, so this is a very complex topic, so I'll really only cover one aspect of it, what I've got time for, something that's applicable to DFWeb specifically. Let's go to the first slide, Brady. So since the pandemic started, a lot of malicious actors have taken advantage to a lot of people working decentralized now, a lot of more systems being online, a lot more systems being exposed to public access. And so we see all kinds of stats with just different hacks on the rise, especially dangerous zero-day hacks. For those that don't know what it is, it's hacks that only the hackers know about, the vendors or the security community is not yet aware of those hacks. That's why they're called zero-day. Let's go to the next slide. There's an example of this earlier this year where Microsoft, their email server, which is an extremely common product in almost every organization today, had actually 3 separate zero-day exploits earlier this year that even Microsoft was not aware of until March. So those hacks were getting exploited as early that we know of as early as January by different hacker groups that were sharing this information internally. And January and February all the way through March, when finally Microsoft released the patch on March 3rd. Of course, that's not the end of the story. Then that patch has to get applied, and the community is not necessarily going to immediately apply that patch, even though they should. And so there were something like 60,000 plus email servers exploited in that first week or two in March. So it just goes to show that hacks do occur, and it's something we do have to worry about, especially with decentralized systems, like in our case, the decentralized clinical trials, where we do have to give a lot of outside sites access to our systems, and we're basically relying on the security of the operating system, and two, the software itself. One possible, so there's many mitigation techniques in IT that we can do to sort of mitigate this risk, but one I'll talk about now that applies to DFWeb specifically, and that's called a web application firewall. Let's go to the next slide. A web application firewall sits between the internet, between the end user and the DF discover, or I guess I should say DFWeb web server. So it looks at the traffic that's going through the web application firewall, and then it accepts or rejects based on what it detects as valid or malicious. Let's go to the next slide. One example of a web application firewall that is available for free is Cloudflare. It's a very common and frequently used web application firewall that's out there available to use. It does require you to move your DNS to their service, to Cloudflare, but that's easy to do. They're just like any other DNS service. And after that, the configuration is extremely straightforward. All you do is you put in the IP address of your internal system, in this case, DFWeb, and take off that proxy box that we see on the slide there. And that's literally all you have to do to configure the system. So something that's extremely easy to implement for anybody using a web-based system today at zero cost. Effectively, what then happens is when somebody tries to access the DFWeb, they don't actually directly access the DFWeb service itself. They access Cloudflare, and then Cloudflare proxies that traffic. I won't go into too much detail, but I'll show a couple of additional benefits that could be implemented. Let's go to the next, let's skip the next slide, Brady, and go to the one after with the BAF rules. So you can limit access by region, for example. So let's say you know that your sites you're working with are only in Canada or only in the States. You could limit by geographic region. Let's go to the next slide. You can limit by URL. So if you know that your URL must contain certain parameters, such as in this example /API/host or /tables, then you can accept only traffic that matches that pattern and reject everything else. Next slide. There's also built-in functionality where if it detects that there is a denial of service attack or something malicious that's known that's out there, it will automatically block that. Next slide. You can implement captcha challenges if you want to. They're sometimes annoying, but that would prevent a bot from connecting to your web application. So it will make sure that only a user would be able to connect. So you get presented with this captcha challenge. You'd say, I'm not a bot, and then it will forward you to the web application. Next slide. There's also functionality to integrate with authentication providers. So you could force the user to authenticate using your Active Directory, for example, before being forwarded then to, in this case, DFWeb. I don't know, this might be overkill for what we're trying to achieve in this case, but this would be very useful if you had, let's say, a legacy web-based app that maybe was written 10 years ago and wasn't being actively maintained anymore, that you no longer trust the security of, but you still need it to use. So you could use this technology to have a really top-end security, but still be able to use a legacy web-based application. Next slide. So to summarize, targeted attacks are on the rise. We need to use security through layers and ideally use many different vendors, many different products to achieve that security through layers to make our IT system as robust as possible. I know I was rushing through those slides because we only had half an hour and we had a lot of information to cram into this time period. If anybody has questions on this, feel free to reach out to any of us, Brady, Masood, or me, and we're happy to answer any questions. Or I guess there's questions. I guess there's some time for questions now. Yeah, that's thanks, Rebecca.
Thank you, Jonas, Brady, and must note I introduced at the beginning. I introduced Stephen too, but sorry for that.
Yeah, sorry, he couldn't be. So I was presenting his slides.
That's perfect. That's okay. Yes, we still have a few minutes for questions, and we have so far we have two, one from Eric and other one from Ed. So Eric is asking, have you had to perform runs for the TAVR study using analog solutions? And if yes, any advice for the group?
Who wants to answer that one? Brady, do you want to answer it, or?
Sure. Yeah, I can take that one. Short answer, no, we haven't had to yet, but we do have a system in place if that does come to pass. I guess maybe I can leave it to Jonas to comment a little bit about on what went into the design of our sort of manual randomization fallback system.
Yeah, is this talking about randomization or just forms in general hybrid?
Yeah, have you had to perform randomization using analog solutions?
Gotcha. Okay. No, we have not. We do have a system in place. Yeah, if we had to, let's say the system was offline, then we do have a manual randomization tick box where we have a lookup table that's printed out, that's with somebody, so that they could phone somebody and we would tell them what the next outcome is in the mapping file. That person would have to be unblinded, but we have not had that situation yet.
Yeah, another one from Jason. What was the auto tool used to remove sensitive info from the images?
Yeah, that's our in-house de-identification software that we've worked to develop here.
Okay, great. Another question from Ed. Is 25 megabytes too limiting maximum size for a DICOM file?
It's going to depend on what type of imaging it is. I'm not quite sure. Did we have 25 megabytes somewhere in our presentation? We deal with files much larger than this usually. Masood, any input there? I would say 25 megs is quite small for these types of files.
I agree, Brady. I think it should be a couple of gigs, right? In general.
Yeah, typically.
CT scans are 2 to 3 gigs usually, and we can definitely process those. I'm not sure where the 25 meg limit is coming from there. We can definitely process files 3, 4 gigs, no problem.
Okay, Ed, feel free to unmute yourself and clarify your question if needed. Okay, he said thanks. I guess that it's okay. Okay, if there is no more questions, at least for today, yeah, let's wrap it up.